I'm Laura Trevelyan in Washington, and this is BBC World News America. The US economy shrinks again, but the president doesn't see a recession. For the second quarter in a row, US economic output falls, raising fears of a recession. But US officials say unemployment is still low. The US Energy Secretary tells us the new Senate climate deal could finally enable America to lower carbon emissions. The US and Chinese leaders talk by phone for a marathon 2 hours plus as tensions grow over Taiwan. Soldiers on the front line of the war in Ukraine say they're doing better against Russia thanks to the arrival of Western weapons. Kenya's elephants in danger. Climate change is now more of a threat than poaching. The Commonwealth Games opened in Birmingham. More than 5,000 athletes from 72 nations and territories will compete over the next 11 days. Welcome to World News America on PBS in the UK and around the globe. We begin tonight with fears of a recession here in the United States. Figures out today showed the economy shrank for the second quarter in a row. Prices for groceries and petrol are rising at the fastest pace in 40 years. This comes after the US Central Bank on Wednesday raised interest rates for the fourth time this year. But President Biden says the underlying economy is still strong.
But let me just give you what the facts are in terms of the state of the economy. Number one, we have a record job market of record unemployment of 3.6% today. We've created 9 million new jobs so far, just since I became president. Businesses are investing in America at record rates. That doesn't sound like a recession to me.
Well, joining us now is former economic advisor to Barack Obama and professor at Harvard University, Jason Furman. Welcome back to the program. So you have the president and the Treasury Secretary saying, what recession? What do you think, though, based on 2 quarters of negative economic growth and still strong employment?
Look, recession is a technical term economists use. In the United States, it's decided by a group of people at the National Bureau of Economic Research. I wouldn't get too hung up on the semantics. The basic facts are the economy is adding a lot of jobs, but economic growth really is negative and appears to be getting worse. That's a weird combination we don't normally see. There's good news there and there's bad news there for the American people.
But meanwhile, we have interest rates going up. Is it possible that that could tip the economy into a recession as the central bank is trying desperately to curb inflation, which is really hurting everyone?
Absolutely, the Fed may end up tipping the economy into a recession. It's very unusual to raise rates when the economy is contracting like this. It's especially unusual to raise them by 75 basis points. But also, this inflation itself is unusual. We haven't had inflation like this for 40 years. So I think the Fed is doing the right thing. I think we may have a soft landing and manage to avoid a recession. But part of what they're trying to do is deal with the problem up front, because the longer you wait, the harder it becomes.
Gas prices are going down and have been for the last month. Do you see any other signs that inflation might be peaking?
Gas prices are the clearest one, but there's a lot of commodities, used cars also, where you're seeing in wholesale markets the prices come down in a way we expect to translate into consumers. The problem is, even if inflation has peaked and it comes down from 9%, falls all the way to 6%, that would still be very, very high inflation.
People are calling this a weird economy. Is it all because we're coming out of the pandemic, where basically the economy was stopped in order to stop the virus, and there was all of this government support, and it's all just still shaking down?
3 huge things. The pandemic was huge. The policy response was huge, I think larger than it needed to be in the United States. And the Russian invasion of Ukraine is having a huge impact, and all 3 of those are working their way through the system simultaneously.
Jason Furman, thanks so much for being with us. Well, Senate Democrats have reached agreement on a landmark energy, climate and healthcare bill. The deal includes nearly $370 billion worth of tax incentives to encourage consumers and companies to switch to cleaner sources of energy. For more on this and on American policy as Russia's at war with Ukraine, I sat down with the US Energy Secretary, Jennifer Granholm, and began by asking about the impact of this new climate agreement. What is that going to mean if it goes through for the US's ability to reduce polluting emissions?
We've got to significantly expand our clean energy capacity in order to meet our Paris goals and in order to meet the president's goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035. So it's going to give us the tools to see that deployment happen. And that is so welcome and very exciting. Again, it hasn't happened yet. Of course, we have to wait for it to pass both chambers, but the fact that there has been a deal reached in principle is very exciting.
The US has been really lagging behind on climate action. So
Yes.
could this turn around the US position and make
completely.
it a leader on climate?
Completely. Obviously, the president campaigned on being a leader on climate. He's got such aggressive goals, and this will enable those goals to become reality. And yes, the U.S. has been, when under the prior administration we pulled out of the Paris Accords, for example. Come on. I mean, all you have to do is look at any paper on any day to see, parts of the planet burning up under heat domes, under extreme weather events. So yeah, we were behind. These actions between the bipartisan infrastructure law that was passed at the end of 2021 and what is being agreed to now, this will really allow us to propel the U.S. in terms of our climate ambitions.
And yet, by releasing gas from the Strategic Petroleum Reserve to lower gas prices, aren't you also encouraging Americans' dependence on polluting fossil fuels?
Well, what the president is really obsessed about, especially right now with inflation being high, is how everyday citizens are having to pay more for fuel. I mean, the fuel alone is, 40% of the rise in inflation. So he's very concerned about what real people are feeling. He wants to make sure people are helped. The price of gas as a result of these releases has dropped 70 cents in the past 6 weeks. So, he wants to make sure that life is affordable for people as we move to this clean energy economy.
But you can't guarantee that fuel prices aren't going to go up again, can you?
Can't guarantee anything because, of course, oil is traded on a global market. And who knows? China opens up significantly post-COVID. That means demand for oil goes up, and that means prices go up. But you know what? These upward spiraling prices of fossil fuels are exactly why we have to transition to a clean economy. Because, my counterpart in Ireland, Minister Ryan, often says, no country has ever been held hostage to access to the sun or access to the wind. So let's build our own energy security, all of us, at home, so that we are not held hostage.
But we see what's happening in Germany because of Russia's invasion of Ukraine and Russia,
the weaponization of Nord
Russia
Stream.
using
Yep.
fuel as a weapon. Germans are being told that they may have to ration their energy.
Mm-hmm.
Could that happen here in the United States? Do you think you're going to have to tell Americans to ration energy this winter?
Well, honestly, I think the price of fuels is an impetus for individuals to make their own decisions about that. But I do also know the president really wants to focus on building out clean. And so we're not in the same position, obviously, as Germany or as as other countries in the EU. Gratefully, we are blessed with an abundance of resources.
So you don't think Americans will have to ration energy?
I don't think there will be rationing, no. But I do know that we want to work on the demand side of fossil fuels by providing clean energy alternatives.
Secretary, what to you is the lesson of Russia's invasion of Ukraine when it comes to energy security and how dependent we are on those that can be hostile actors?
Yes, isn't the security of a nation number one priority? So that means that developing our own clean energy resources at home makes us energy secure, reduces costs for our people because the sun is the cheapest form of energy. It puts people to work. Millions of people across the globe will be put to work by building clean energy solutions. And it saves the planet. It's a win-win-win-win.
Secretary Granholm, thank you so much for your time.
You bet.
Well, those who play with fire will only get burnt. The words of the Chinese President Xi Jinping to President Biden when the two spoke for more than 2 hours on Thursday morning. That line about fire was a warning regarding US policy towards Taiwan, which is self-governing, though Beijing claims the island belongs to China. The Speaker of the US House of Representatives may go to Taiwan next month. For more, let's bring in our State Department correspondent, Barbara Plett-Usher. Barbara, that was a marathon phone call. Both sides had slightly different readouts. How do you interpret what they had to say about really what actually went on between the two men?
Well, there were points of convergence, Laura, but I think they mostly illustrated the competing narratives. So, for example, the White House said the call was about efforts to manage differences responsibly and work together on areas where interests align. Beijing said, well, there are many areas where interests align. The problem is Washington's approach because it sees China as a primary rival and the most serious challenge in the long term. And then when it came to those differences that need to be responsibly managed, it was clear that Taiwan was at the top of the list, as you suggested. And once again, China expounded on its claim to Taiwan, and it warned in typically fiery language that the U.S. better not change its policy. And the U.S. or the White House responded rather tersely. It hadn't changed its policy, which is to recognize that China's only government is in Beijing, not in Taipei. But it also had its own warning against any unilateral attempt to change the status quo. And so that really reflects the concern here that if these tensions with China on lots of different topics do end up exploding into conflict, that it would likely be over something like Taiwan.
And Barbara, has Speaker Pelosi actually said whether she is going to Taiwan in August?
No, she hasn't. That was a leak, Laura. We know that she was planning to go in April and she got COVID, and there are reasons why she'd like to go. She has a long history of standing up to China, especially when it comes to human rights. There's very strong support, bipartisan support in Congress for Taiwan, especially with the sense that China is increasingly threatening it. And, you know, Nancy Pelosi may be retiring soon if the Democrats lose the House in November. So it's up to her if she wants to go. Congress is independent of the administration. She has been privately advised that this would not be a great time to do so because for various reasons the Chinese see it as particularly provocative. But we haven't heard about a decision either way.
And Barbara, why would it be seen as so provocative? Is it all tied into Russia's invasion of Ukraine and the US feeling that the Chinese might potentially try to make a move on Taiwan?
Well, those are factors that have increased tensions with the United States, between China and the United States. But I think the key thing really it has to do with China. It has to do with an important party congress that is taking place in November, at which Xi Jinping, the president, wants to cement his bid for a third term in leadership. And he is facing a lot of domestic problems, economic problems, and so on. And the feeling in Washington is if he is presented with this challenge to China over Taiwan, as Beijing would see it, he might be triggered to take a more provocative response than he would otherwise have done, because he doesn't want to look as if he's weak before this party Congress. So I think that is really the thing that the administration is thinking about.
Barbara Plett-Usher, thank you. Now, Ukrainian soldiers on the front lines are saying the rate of Russia's bombardment of eastern Ukraine has dropped by at least half, thanks to the arrival of sophisticated Western weapons. But is it merely a brief lull or a sign that the tide is truly turning in the conflict? Our correspondent, Andrew Harding, reports from Donbass.
The familiar sounds of war thunder across Ukraine's front lines. But something is changing here in the Donbass. We're rushing to a secret location and a rare rendezvous with a weapon that might just be helping to tip the balance in this war. The Caesar is a gift from France to Ukraine. Today, its giant gun is aiming at a Russian target 27 kilometers away. 3 shots in just over a minute, then a swift departure.
Okay, now we have to get out quickly before the Russians potentially find our positions and fire back.
These guns are making all the difference, says Dmitro, the unit commander. We can now hit the Russians more accurately and further away, which means they can only attack us half or a third as often as before. And here's the proof. Footage of giant Russian ammunition stores exploding, hit by Western weapons like the Caesar, and by this long-range American rocket system. Key bridges are being targeted too now, like this one further south in Kherson, near Crimea, potentially trapping Russian armour and hinting at a future Ukrainian counter-offensive. Which all helps to explain this. All quiet, unusually quiet on this stretch of the Eastern Front. Another sign, perhaps, of Russia's faltering momentum. Just listen to that silence. The point these soldiers keep making to us along the length of this front line is that Western weapons really are making a big difference, but not yet a decisive difference. They still need many more if they are to turn the tide against the Russians. It's balanced now, 50-50, says Colonel Yuri Bereza. That's thanks to the artillery the West has sent here. But we're not yet in a position to counterattack. We still need a lot more weapons, or it will be a bloodbath. And it's not just about equipment. Manpower matters, and Ukraine has lost so many soldiers that it's still struggling to fill the gaps with fresh recruits.
Acquiring my site.
Hence this extra training by a group of private Western military experts for volunteers who've never fought before.
I would say worrying would be the fact that some of these guys could be in a trench tomorrow, or they could be on a front tomorrow, and they lack the basic soldiering skills that the West is used to. But a good positive is this is their homeland, and all 36, 37 of these soldiers seem eager to defend it. You gotta have heart. Skill's good, but heart's great.
Plenty of heart then, but still not enough weapons or trained soldiers to be sure of success. Andrew Harding, BBC News in eastern Ukraine.
Well, the war in Ukraine has transformed the life of the country's First Lady, Olena Zelenska. Once known for her love of privacy, she's now on the cover of Vogue magazine. She's spoken to the US Congress. Today, she spoke to the BBC, expressing her concern about the psychological cost of war on Ukrainians, especially on women.
The whole of Ukraine is currently in constant stress. For example, there was a mass rocket attack last night, this morning, on the Ukrainian territory. It was the Kiev region and in the east and in the north of Ukraine. And we feel that constantly. Every person lives in constant stress from the 24th of February. That does not relent. So each and every one of us has to learn to live with that feeling.
Olena Zelenska, the First Lady of Ukraine there, speaking to the BBC. In other news now from around the world, an ongoing battle between rival gangs in Haiti has reached the centre of the capital, Port-au-Prince. Video showed gang members and police engaged in a fierce gun battle on Wednesday. It's not clear how many people had died since the violence began 3 weeks ago, although the United Nations estimates that more than 200 people died during 9 days earlier in July. Officials in the US state of Kentucky issued flash flood warnings on Thursday after heavy rain caused flooding in parts of the state. The governor said the rain had caused one of the worst, most devastating flooding events in the state's history, with more than 8 inches of rain falling overnight. It comes after record-breaking rain left parts of Missouri underwater earlier this week. The Democratic Republic of Congo has put 30 oil and gas drilling permits up for auction, opening up part of the world's second biggest rainforest to drilling. Activists call this an environmental catastrophe, which could release large amounts of carbon into the atmosphere. The DRC's president said the process was a way to benefit from the country's natural resources. Climate change is now a bigger threat to elephants than poaching, so says Kenya's Wildlife Ministry. In the last year, official figures show 179 elephants have died due to the ongoing drought. Mercy Juma reports from the Tsavo National Park in Kenya, where poor rainy seasons have led to rivers drying up and a warning her report contains upsetting images.
A bone here, a jaw there, ribs scattered around. These are the remains of an elephant. In the last few months, such scenes have been found by rangers in Kenya's largest park, the Tsavo.
For the last about 30 minutes, we've been following a really strong stench. The Kenya Wildlife Service rangers say that stench will lead us to a carcass. We're here. This is the carcass of an elephant, and it's still fresh, maybe a few days old. It's now just pieces of bones and some flesh remaining.
Kenya and the larger Horn of Africa is going through the worst drought in 40 years. There have been 4 failed rain seasons. The situation has become unforgiving even to the giants of the animal kingdom.
Climate change kills 20 times elephant than poaching. So it is a red alarm. Total across the country, elephants died already, as per end of June, 179. So far, poached animals across the country, they are less than 10.
The elephants who roam Kenya's broad savanna bring hundreds of thousands of tourists every year.
Kenya Wildlife Service rangers will bring tourists here anytime they come down to the Tsavo East National Park, because normally there would be hundreds of wild animals here drinking water, playing with mud, taking a bath, but today there is none. This water pan is gradually drying up and the animals have moved away in search of water.
The elephants are not only dying of dehydration, but also malnutrition, because even where there are water holes, they have seriously depleted vegetation.
Elephant in a day, they eat 300 kilograms of dry mass, drinking 240 liters of water. Remember, this is the season when the elephant give birth. We expect so many miscarriages, and we have seen them before. And those calves that will manage to be born, their chances of survival will be limited.
There are efforts to bring some relief to the elephants and other animals in the park. Drought-resistant trees are being planted in some areas. Huge water pans are also being dug with the hopes that when it will rain, the water that will collect there will sustain the animals for a longer period. Remains of nearly 6,000 elephants that died during the prolonged drought of the early 70s are preserved at this research center here in Tsavo. Perhaps a constant reminder that it could happen again. There are 36,000 elephants in Kenya. Climate change is now threatening their survival. Mercy Juma, BBC News, Tsavo, Southern Kenya.
Commonwealth Games have begun in Birmingham with the opening ceremony marking the start of 11 days of competition. Prince Charles and the Duchess of Cornwall attended the ceremony, which told the story of the city of Birmingham and was headlined by the band Duran Duran. Our sports correspondent, Jane Dougal, is in Birmingham's Victoria Park with this preview of the Games.
There's been a party going on here in Victoria Square as people gather to celebrate the opening of these Commonwealth Games in Birmingham. Representatives from 72 nations and territories around the globe will be taking part, with 6,500 athletes and officials all descending here on Birmingham ahead of the events. It's in Commonwealth Games history, with new sports 2020 cricket, 3-on-3 basketball and swimming. The events themselves begin on Friday. They are the most inclusive to date. 42 para sports that will be running and also more.
Stronger relative of Tyrannosaurus rex roamed the Earth 77 million years ago. This one was found today in New York as the only one available to private buyers anywhere in the world. Our question to the new owner, what will you call it? Gorgie. Thanks for watching.